Hello, I'm Harley Schlanger from the Schiller Institute, and I'd like to welcome you to this week's webcast featuring Schiller Institute Chairman Helga Zepp LaRouche. Obviously, the lead topic for today is the historic visit of President Donald Trump to China as part of his extended visit to Asia. Now, if you're looking for reporting on this in the Western media, forget it. Just looking at some of the headlines, the Washington Post had a headline today, "How will China play Trump?" The New York Times featured an Obama Deputy National Security Advisor, Tony Blinken, blink and wink and a nod. And Blinken had a comment that his title was, "Trump ceding global leadership to China." And you have the Democratic senator from Connecticut, Blumenthal, coming out with a press conference accusing Trump of colluding with China. So we really need to get a picture of what's happening in the full strategic significance. And to that, we turn to Helga Zepp LaRouche. So, Helga?
Yeah, hello. Well, I think from what we can know today, which is the second day of the, I would say, historic visit of President Trump in China, I think it is exactly what I expected would happen. That both sides know perfectly well that the future of mankind depends on the relationship between the United States and China as the most important two nuclear powers and economic powers in the world. And I think it went very well. I think the statements by President Xi Jinping characterizing the meeting as a strategic new beginning, a mutual beneficial relationship of historic importance, which can solve not only the problems of the two peoples, but of the whole world. I think that this is absolutely to the point, and President Trump was very enthusiastic. He praised China and its great president, whom he, according to his tweet, feels very warm feelings. I mean, this is really good, because if the two presidents understand each other and can make it work, then I fully agree there is no problem in the whole world which cannot be tackled. So I think this is a gigantic step forward. And I think it's also interesting that Trump, who was very much talking about the trade gap between the United States and China. However, he said, he does not blame China for that, because he respects it that President Xi would do everything to the maximum benefit to his own country and people. And then he blamed previous U.S. administrations of having allowed to drop exports to China so much that this trade gap now exists. And remember, the Chinese always wanted to import much more from the United States, but the previous administrations, who were on a confrontation, containment, encirclement policy towards China, they refused to sell many of the products which China wanted to buy, with the pretext of a dual use, that things could be used both for civilian and a military purpose. And naturally, there's almost anything you can use for either peaceful or not so peaceful purposes, depending, what is the intent of your policy. So I think that this is very good. They concluded, I think, somewhere in the range of $250 billion deals, various things ranging from infrastructure, transport, energy, agricultural exports from the United States to China, just a very wide variety of economic deals. They also decided to not only improve and strengthen the relationship between the two presidents, but to increase the cooperation on all levels, to strengthen the 4 permanent dialogues which had been arranged already in Florida in April, one of them dealing with the economic cooperation. And I think that an absolute basis has been laid to continue to develop this relationship to the benefit not only of China and the United States, but really for the whole world. So naturally, they agreed fully on the need to solve the North Korea problem, which they want to work together towards. And also Trump expressed confidence that with the help of China and Russia, which he had said at an earlier occasion, that problem can be brought to a positive solution. So while I have not seen any direct mentioning of the United States working with the Belt and Road Initiative as such, I know that that is the mindset of President Xi. And I think that also, coming out of the 19th National Congress of the Communist Party, where Xi Jinping has laid the goal till 2050 to build a community of a shared future of mankind. I think this trip by President Trump has been a gigantic step in the right direction. And I think, the Chinese really know how to bring into the conscious the 5,000-year history of China. And I think Trump was treated really very well. They had a one-day or several-hour very special treatment in the Forbidden City, which was closed to the public. And they performed 3 Beijing operas and showed, restoration of handicrafts, ancient handicrafts. So Trump was very, very happy, and he sent a message to Xi Jinping saying that he and Melania will never forget this experience. So I think from a human standpoint, this is very positive. And these journalists should just go and shame themselves, because they are so cynical that never anything will move their hearts and minds. And probably these minds are dried out like old plums anyway. So I wouldn't worry what they are writing, because I think these 2 presidents have made a very positive step, moving human history forward.
It's also significant that there are a group of businessmen who are part of a delegation that will be involved in the meetings. And I think that's where we may hear later more of the specifics on the Belt and Road connection with the Chinese. Now, before he came to China, he was in South Korea and Japan. And I wonder if you have some thoughts about those meetings and their significance.
Well, I think they were significant, but I think the upcoming meeting in Vietnam is going to be more important, because it is now definitely confirmed that Trump will meet President Putin tomorrow, and I think that meeting will be very important also, because President Putin just wrote an article, as basically commenting ahead of that APEC summit about it, where he said that what will be discussed at the APEC meeting in the context of the already ongoing integration of the Belt and Road Initiative with the Eurasian Economic Union, that Russia will present a major plan for the development of the Far East of Russia, that this will be a national priority for the year 2000, or the century 2000, the 21st century, where many infrastructure projects are supposed to be built, but also industrial parks, investments in various ways. And he already emphasized the positive cooperation between Russia, China, Japan, and the Koreas. So I think that what is clearly emerging is more and more an integrated economic new system, where basically it is very clear, as long as the Europeans remain in their standoffish, or at least the EU and the German government for that matter, remain in their standoffish attitude. It is what one businessman said recently: if they don't jump on the train, then they will see the final lights of the last wagon leaving the station and being left behind. So I think the center of strategic importance is clearly moving towards Asia right now. And, hopefully, this US-Chinese relationship will continue to expand. And then I'm very optimistic that, also the Trump-Putin meeting will be very successful. I have reason to believe that this will also be a major breakthrough. And then these journalists of these yellow papers will just, tear themselves apart like Rumpelstilzchen. And that's what they should do.
And one other thing I'd just like you to comment on, which I'm sure is very interesting to you, given the importance that you put on the cultural exchange and the understanding of other cultures, was President Trump's granddaughter singing for them on video Chinese songs. Did you get a chance to see that, Helga?
Yes. I think this was very sweet. And obviously, while the little girl was not there, her video was presented, and I think it expressed the spirit of absolute appreciation for the Mandarin culture, and I think it was very well taken.
Well, now we can look at when we talk about the journalists with their nonsense and the coverage of this, and they're attempting to keep the real story out. We are seeing some breaks with the whole Russiagate story. And of course, we've been covering this very extensively, but in the last couple of days, there was the report that Bill Binney, the former NSA technical expert, met with Mike Pompeo of the CIA at Donald Trump's urging. Pompeo greeted him at Trump's urging to talk about the fact that there was no Russian hacking. What do you make of that?
I think this is very important. It clearly shows that President Trump is fully aware of the revelations of the Veterans for Sanity or Intelligence for Sanity, the VIPs, of which William Binney is a member. And that means that President Trump is also not afraid of the Russiagate, because, by asking Pompeo, the current head of the CIA, to meet with Binney, that is now on the record, so to speak. And now the investigation, which the FBI never did, obviously has to follow. And the key argument which Binney made previously, at our event in New York and at other occasions, is that there is forensic evidence that it was not hacking, but that it was downloading of this material to a storage device, because the speed with which it occurred is 4 times higher than you could get it from the internet. And the VIPs have presented this documentation at a Schiller Institute event in New York a couple of months ago, and that will now be investigated, and they will come to the exact same conclusion that there was no hacking. And with that, I think the whole Russia spook story will just vanish, and that will liberate Trump to do policy as a president should be. That was the whole purpose of the Russiagate, to prevent him from having a change in the attitude towards Russia and China. And I think this is clearly backfiring. And then, you have all these investigations now, which we mentioned already last time, with the Donna Brazil book, saying very clearly that Hillary did sort of steal the election, in a certain sense, this whole story can turn totally the other way. You have the ongoing investigations in the Senate and in the Congress on the whole British role, which is now becoming much more prominent in the discussion that, US intelligence services from the Obama period used foreign intelligence against an own presidential opponent. That's more than opposition research. This is potentially, something very criminal, and that may all come out now.
And 2 other footnotes on that. One is Binney referred to Russiagate as mindless drivel. And if you think about it, that's what the American people and the people in Western Europe have been fed for a full year now, mindless drivel. Now, the other thing that I think is interesting is the interconnection between the Hillary Clinton expose from Donna Brazil and the whole fusion GPS, because this story is now coming out of all the interconnection leading back to London. So as you've been pointing out, it looks as though this whole thing will come to the forefront soon.
Well, I think there is another interesting thing which I think people should reflect upon, because all these accusations against Putin being a dictator, against Xi Jinping being a new Mao, and all of these insinuations that these countries are not democratic and are dictatorships. Well, I mean, the Democratic Party, and I emphasize Democratic Party, it now is established that the DNC picked their candidate, Hillary Clinton, 1 year before the National Convention, and then manipulating the whole electoral process in such a way that Bernie Sanders, who probably would have won against Trump, or at least there was a good chance that this could have happened, was sidelined and obviously betrayed. Now, what does that say about democracy? I think people should reflect on the fact that this present party system, as it has developed with a very large influence of Wall Street in it, given the fact that the seats, that people need 5 million, 10 million in order to run for a congressional seat, that system clearly is not working. And, in a certain sense, I think it is time to change a lot of things, to change not only the set of relations among nations internationally, but also go back to a discussion like it was in the Federalist Papers in the United States, for example. Can a people govern itself? I think this is a very, very important question. And, I think that democracy is just a joke. I mean, the Democratic Party did their very best to prove exactly that.
Well, and we're also learning more and more about how this was an operation to take money from the state parties. And that's one of the reasons the Democrats have been losing every single race up until recently. Interestingly, also, I think just to make a note of this, is that Donna Brazil referred to 3 titanic egos, that of Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz, stripping the core out of the Democratic Party. And I think that's what most people see. Now, Helga, the other thing that I think is really crucial that we need to hear your thoughts on is what's happening in the Middle East right now. As is typically the case when there are developments like the Trump-Xi Jinping meeting, the enemy is operating elsewhere to cause serious disruptions. And we see the events unfolding in Lebanon with a possible Saudi-Israeli involvement in a war in Lebanon, the ongoing events in Yemen. And you just participated in a conference a couple of days ago via video in Yemen about the Chinese Silk Road extension to that part of the Arabian Peninsula. Why don't you give us a little bit of a report on that and what your thoughts are about this very dangerous situation emerging in the Middle East?
Well, I think it is very dangerous because just at the point when the ISIS forces were as good as defeated in Syria and Iraq, you had this operation obviously run by the young Crown Prince Mohammed al-Salman, where when Hariri, Prime Minister Hariri from Lebanon, was on a visit in Saudi Arabia, conveniently, US intelligence, at least that's what some Israeli reports are saying, provided Saudi Arabia with the information that there was an assassination plot against Hariri. So he resigned and stayed in Saudi Arabia. And that naturally aggravates the situation in Lebanon, which is very tense anyway, because this country has as many refugees as it has citizens, which means a total tense situation as it is. Now, obviously, then there was this strange incident about a missile shot from Yemen into Saudi Arabia. Now, that is very strange because what would be the purpose of one single missile? Naturally, the Saudis claimed that it was from Iran via Hezbollah, and it is now heating up the whole situation. The worst thing about it is that the Saudis blocked all ports and entry points into Yemen, and this has dramatically worsened the situation in Yemen, which is already one of absolute danger of starvation of millions of people, so that even the UN Human Rights Commission and similar people came out and said there is an immediate danger of 7 million people dying of hunger and epidemics, cholera and similar things in Yemen, and that they demand immediately that all ports and other such routes are opened, that the blockade is ended. And I think this is really something which must get public international attention, because this is a genocide taking place in front of the world public, and this absolutely must end. And we should not forget that the dossier which we have published about Robert Mueller, which details the whole apparatus which went after my husband and his organization in the 80s and 90s, is the same apparatus which is covering up for 9/11, and which was is the apparatus which is still deploying against President Trump. And these are absolutely the similar forces who are behind this operation against Yemen. So this is all hanging together and requires absolute important investigation, and people have to really get mobilized that this genocide is being stopped.
And in spite of the desperate situation in Yemen, it seems from the report I saw that the conference you addressed a couple of days ago, there's tremendous spirit. Again, it's the optimism of the New Silk Road is coming into that country, isn't it?
Yes. There is a very delightful reading group. People are studying since quite some time the report which we published, The New Silk Road Becomes the World Land Bridge. And that obviously includes the extension of the New Silk Road into Yemen. And people are really taking this as the hope for their future. And I think it would be very good if people in other countries around the world would do likewise, because there is this alternative plan. And, I think that the chances that it will come to a cooperation of Russia, China, and the United States in rebuilding this region, getting Iran and Saudi Arabia on one table and overcoming this terrible conflict between the Sunnis and the Shiites, which has been played by the British for a very long time, and that we move to a different era of mankind. I think this is the absolute demand of the hour.
And just to come back to that overriding theme of the US, Russia, China relationship, I guess we'll see that again in action with the meetings still to come in Vietnam and elsewhere that President Trump is going to have on this trip.
Yes, I think that will be tomorrow. So people should pay attention to this summit, because I think major things will occur there.
Now, I want to just bring another thing to the attention of our listeners, which is that this has been a week of anniversaries, and I think it's important to get a perspective, a good, competent historical perspective of what's happened. You had just a couple of days ago the 100th anniversary of the Balfour Declaration, which has a lot to do with the British Empire's destruction of the Middle East and the ongoing activity there. There was the 100th anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution yesterday. And then today is a very important day in Germany. It's the 28th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. And you were very active in that period. And in fact, I think it's fair to say that the idea of the Silk Road grew out of the effects of the collapse of the Berlin Wall and the potential for the reunification of Germany. So I'd like you to say something about that, because you are uniquely situated to put this together, this history together in a way that makes sense for people.
Well, yeah, that is absolutely true, because my husband, LaRouche, had forecasted the collapse of the Soviet Union already in '84. And, he basically said if they would stick to their then existing policy of the Orgakov plan and similar things, and of primitive accumulation against their own economy, they would collapse in 5 years. And that's exactly what started to happen with the fall of the wall. And since he had already proposed in 1988 that the Comecon would collapse soon, he made that prognosis in '88, 1 year before it happened. and that there would be soon a German unification, and that with Berlin as the capital, and that the unified Germany should start to develop countries of the Comecon with modern technology and infrastructure. And he proposed that the first such country should be Poland. So therefore, when the wall came down, it was not really a surprise for us. As a matter of fact, we were the only ones prepared for that occasion. And we developed then this idea of a productive triangle from Paris, Berlin, Vienna, which was a highly industrialized area of the size and territory of, let's say, Japan. And we proposed it should be upgraded through infrastructure, maglev trains, HTR reactors, the Sanger project, Mach 1 or Mach 2 planes. Anyway, so we proposed that, and when the Soviet Union then collapsed, as a matter of fact, we had that report ready in January 1990, about 6 weeks after the fall of the wall. And this would have been already a peace plan at that point. But as we know, the powers to be, the neocons in the United States, Margaret Thatcher, Mitterrand, they all had their own geopolitical reasons to prevent that. But when the Soviet Union collapsed in 91, we just extended that productive triangle to become the Eurasian land bridge, proposing economic transport development corridors along the Trans-Siberian Railroad, along the old Silk Road. And this was really, it could have, what is happening now with China and the Belt and Road Initiative could have happened already in 91. Now, it didn't happen, and I published a documentation about the developments from that time, which is called The Lost Chance of 1989, because that opportunity was not used. People remember that the shock therapy was imposed on Russia in order to turn Russia from a superpower into a third world raw material exporting country, which was what happened under the Yeltsin period. And so this entire decade of the 90s was one of genocide for Russia. I mean, people have written books about it, from Professor Sergei Klasiev and others. Now, when Putin came back, he started to undo that. And that is why he attracted so much hatred from the people who had wanted to put Russia into a corner. Now, he is now doing a lot to undo that. And what I said earlier about the development of the Far East is a very important component of that. So in a certain sense, this is a second chance. And this time, I think the possibility that it's being used to establish truly a peace order for the 21st century and ending the period of geopolitics, this is very close. If the relationship, which was clearly brought forward a gigantic step between Xi Jinping and Trump, if that consolidates and the relationship between China, Russia, and hopefully, the United States is becoming part of that triangular, and then, maybe India changes its mind and maybe even the Europeans get on board, we can enter a completely new set of relationships among countries. And I would invite all you, our viewers, to become an active part. The Schiller Institute is a membership think tank. You can become an active member in the Schiller Institute by contributing research, by doing all kinds of things. You can actually help to bring such a new era of civilization about by joining us. So I want to invite you to do exactly that, to celebrate the moment.
And I think the fact that you made very clear to people how devastating losing that opportunity of 1989 has been, with the 28 years of degeneration in the United States, the wars, the terrorism, and so on, we have to take this chance. And this is where the optimism comes from, that there are countries that are already doing that.
Yes, I think it will sink in that situation is there, and if the Russia gate in the United States stops, I think, you know, the world can become better, and even in the United States, people can join this hopeful perspective, you know, and I think they need it so badly because, you know, the infrastructure is in terrible shape, the drug epidemics is there. In Europe, you have a situation where, you know, some youth in especially the south of Europe have neither a job nor an education. But with the new Silk Road, people have a future and a perspective, you know, to really end poverty, to end a miserable life for so many people, and, you know, focus on the common aims of mankind. I mean, there's so many riches to be discovered, so many discoveries to be made, and it's about time that we give mankind an order which is worthy of the character of the human species.
Well, the next few days will be very important, and I think it's very important that people join us again next week to get the update on the completion of President Trump's trip and the implications for us in the West. So Helga, thank you very much for joining us, and for all of you listening, we'll see you next week.
Yes, till next week.